So I just figured something out. If you go back to 2010, President, or is it 2012? First term of Obama's administration, the United States launched a Navy SEAL operation in about Pakistan, where they invaded a uh, compound about 2 miles away from their equivalent where of their major military academy for the whole country, and they took out Osama bin Laden and his family. Which brings us to the big question: why was Pakistan harboring the most wanted man in the world a couple miles away from their major military academy? Now, I don't know about you, but if there was a major installation like that a couple miles away from the Air Force Academy in Fort Collins, or really any military base here in the United States, with that level of security for a for a location, any government in the world would go in and say, okay, we should figure out, who's living here. We should figure out like who's coming in and out, and it would be under surveillance. They'd figure out who's there and say, oh, it's Osama bin Laden. It's literally the most wanted man on the planet, and they would take him out. Bin Laden was there for several years, and there's really no way that Pakistan did not realize that. There is no way that with all of the satellite imagery that the United States and the European Union gather, that they didn't realize probably a couple years in advance that that building was not normal, and especially as they watched it being built by satellite imagery, and which is how we eventually went in without the consent of Pakistan and took out the most wanted terrorist on the face of the planet. Which brings us to a question. Pakistan willfully, knowingly, must have known that was something wrong. They must have realized that who was there. There's no way they didn't figure that out. They definitely have security cameras around Abbottabad. I mean, again, it's the military academy of the country. They're going to have surveillance in there. They're going to know what's going on. And so, as they are doing that, they must have known bin Laden was there, is my conclusion. And Pakistan has a good-sized military, and they have one of the largest military budgets in the world, mostly because of their constant squabbling with India. With all of their resources, they've never had the ability to go into tribal regions and take out the terrorist cells in that area. Why? Well, rewind to September 11th, 2001. The Saudi paramilitary group Al-Qaeda bombed the largest city in the United States of America, New York City, and the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., blowing up part of the Pentagon and both of the World Trade Center towers. And in response, the United States did the Patriot Act, and there was the 9/11 Commission. Part of the 9/11 Commission was, increasing American security to prevent things happening in the future. And so this would include a lot of visa restrictions on a bunch of countries, namely Canada, Germany, Australia, Japan, France, Spain, the UK, Sweden, Greece, Cyprus, countries like that, Taiwan, South Korea, New Zealand, the list goes on. Visas on all of them except Canada, essentially. They're not very expensive, but they are indeed visas. After Saudi Arabia attacked us. Oh, wait. I did not name Saudi Arabia. That is correct. Saudi Arabia was not one of the countries included in many of the sanctions and visa and trade barriers that the 9/11 Commission proposed. Saudi Arabia was conspicuously missing. The countries included are mostly NATO members. Then moving on from that side point. So Pakistan looked at this. It looked at the side effect of the United States implementation of travel restrictions on most of our allies, and they looked at most of the countries that had basically no impact from the United States were countries like Saudi Arabia, where most of the leaders of Al-Qaeda are from, at that point in time at least, and where most of the leaders are citizens of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is a country which has been known for a while to be a country which they've had rich oil men who have been funding terrorist organizations for decades. This is common knowledge in the political science world. And the Saudi government does nothing about that. And they haven't done anything about that for about 40 years because Wahhabism, the Salafi movement, which is the religion that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban claim to follow, is the state religion of Saudi Arabia. And so Pakistan looks at this reality in the 2000s of like, okay, terrorist organization bombs the largest city and the capital of the United States of America, which is the preeminent world power at the time, and a beacon of freedom in the world. In response, the United States cracks down on basically everybody, including its own citizens, none of whom were involved in the 9/11 bombings, to take out terrorist organizations. So basically, if you're hitting everybody except the people who actually caused trouble, and then when we actually go into that war in Afghanistan, it's pretty botched for the first year, and less than 2 years later, we're diverting most of our military force to Iraq, a country where Al-Qaeda had basically no military existence before the invasion. Now, of course, they do, but that's what happens when you create a power vacuum on a country that has a massive border with their primary financer, Saudi Arabia, obviously. And so with that, and creating a giant power vacuum, particularly in northern Iraq, which you got the Islamic State at the beginning of Obama's presidency. So Pakistan's looking at the world in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, and they're saying, okay, if we go buddy-buddy with the United States, the favors we will get are visas on our citizens and an increasing trade barriers. If we are a country like Saudi Arabia and we actively have citizens of our country financing terrorist organizations which are going to be actively ignored by the United States with no significant actions done at all besides a war in Afghanistan and a war in Iraq, which was not allied with Saudi Arabia or Al-Qaeda at all. What reason do they have to help the United States? They're not going to lose our military support. They're not going to stop being a major non-NATO ally in name only. Why help us? And so they did the thing that all of the countries that were not targeted by the 9/11 Commission did, which is they supported terrorism, which is how Osama bin Laden set up a very large military compound right next to the major military training academy of the entire nation. Basically, that's what happened in the 2000s. That's what the Bush administration did. And by doing that, because the 9/11 Commission attacked everybody in the world except those who are actively attacking terrorists, we sent a message to the world that if you are ally, we are going to screw you, and if you are actively supporting terrorists, we are going to ignore you. Pakistan knew this, and that's why they did not help and do not help with the war on terror. They were acting rationally. The Patriot Act created Pakistan to become an adversary of the United States. It destroyed our image in our allies and it increased the number of adversaries of the United States abroad. It reduced democratization not just here at home, but globally. There is absolutely no evidence that anything in the Patriot Act has ever even once prevented one single terrorist attack. If there was one time in the last 20 years where the Patriot Act committed one single attack, the government would never shut up about it, especially the GOP. And most moderate Democrats would be like, look, it works, it works, it works. There is no such case. I have done multiple times where I've tried to find either academic journals or news articles talking about times where the ESTA, the visa policy we set up on the French and other countries, the French, of course, have been our ally since 1775. Longer than any other country in the world. A couple blips here and there, but it's 200 years. But they're our oldest ally, and we created visas for them. The Patriot Act attacked the French more than the Saudi Arabians, attacked the American citizens more than people who actually attacked the United States. There is absolutely no evidence of anybody actually being arrested in the United States for a crime that has been detected by the Patriot Act. There is no evidence that I can find of a single time of the new visas put in place by the Bush and Obama administrations ever once preventing a single terrorist attack. There is no such case. So there is no wonder that when the United States is going to attack our allies far more than the people who actually attacked us in 2001, of course Pakistan is going to read that and say, why help the United States? If I help them, they're going to shoot us in the back. And if I hurt them and bomb their cities, nothing will happen. And that is why Pakistan harbored Saudi Arabia. The Patriot Act makes America not just less free, but it puts us in danger and creates adversaries where there should be allies, and does not make allies out of adversaries. The Patriot Act is not just unconstitutional, it is counterproductive. We need to end the ESTA, the visas we have on most of our allies in the world. That must be ended. It does not work. And we need to look at which policies are actually going to counter terrorism. When you look at instead of sending bombs and weapons to Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Israel, we need to be sending money to found schools and fund teachers so that children can learn in countries where their education system is poor. We need to be sending out scholarships and grants so that people in these countries can come to the United States, so they can study political science, so they can study economics, so they can study anything they want. But if there's just one time the United States spends $1 billion a year having people from less stable, less developed countries come to the United States and they study political science and economics, and they go home and they do social organizing back home, and they create a political party and stabilize their country and create good government there by building those institutions, you realize how much money that's going to save us, how much that's going to save the United States and the rest of the world. Instead of locking down our borders from our allies, instead of creating surveillance on all of the people are almost certainly never going to commit a single attack on another person in the existence of their entire lives, maybe instead we should look at the policies which actually work and fund education and scholarship grants so we have more people come to the United States. Because I promise you one thing, if you want to make it so fewer people attack the United States, you want them to know people in the United States. You want them to know we are not scary people, that most of us are just people living our lives, and that there's no need to attack us, that most of us don't want to hurt other people and other countries. Increase those scholarships, increase those grants, make it so there are people around the world who have been to America and have been to Europe and say, you know what? Yeah, they have had stable government for decades and decades, and they benefit from that daily, from a high standard of living. But that's not a reason to bomb someone. That's the policy which will fight terrorism. Education, travel, get those people-to-people connections. Make sure people in these countries know Americans are able to get access to come to this country on a student visa or a work visa, so that they can send money back home, so that they can say, you know, the United States is good. The European Union is a place where we should be allies. The first thing we need to do, we need to kill the ESTA, and we need to end the Patriot Act. We need to end unwarranted surveillance, shut down the NSA, and use that money that we are wasting currently, which is increasing terrorism abroad, to increase education in these countries, which will actually fight terrorism. That's how you end terrorism around the world. That's why Pakistan supports Al-Qaeda.